Okay, this is the new Richmond Active Directory sync tool, the Richmond AD Observer settings. So this is new in version 14.7. There's no Windows application. So you would have a shortcut to launch it from the server. Default URL is localhost :7812. This is the actual port which it's connecting on. So it's loading very similar to a web app. So before you log into this, just a couple of background things that need to be set up on here. So if I just go into the, so there is a setting within here. We've got a number of settings within here. So within the Richmond Systems folder and Services folder, there's an Active Directory Observer folder. So the first thing is to make sure that the config file is set. So this is your database connection string. So you've got your SQL server name here and the database name there. Just making sure that is set. You can actually connect to multiple databases as well just by copying this line and changing the connections name to 2, and then you can have multiple connection strings within here, very similar to the email and copy and processing. Just another file here as well. You see we've got the port which I mentioned that we're connecting on. You can actually change that here as well. So you can change the port, and there's a few other settings and loop intervals and so forth. So at the moment it's every 15 seconds, but we can change that as well. Okay, so there's some settings in the background. Also, you won't be able to connect to this unless the Active Directory Observer service is running. So this needs to be set to running first before we can connect. So this is the interface. We haven't got any connections at the moment, so we need to create a new connection string. So I'm just going to call this Richmond test and your LDAP path within here. So you just put your fully qualified domain name with LDAP at the front. It's best to put this in capitals, LDAP, and then I'm just going to do our test domain. I can spell that right. Then we connect on get full info. So before we do anything else, we just need to retrieve our AD structure, and then it's showing your domain. So if you've got a large AD, just bear in mind it may take a few minutes to load. So we go into the OUs, and this is a computer OU, and it's shown as actual computers within here, similar to the previous one. So I'm just going to click a couple of these, so users and computers, and properties to copy. So it's now a lot easier to edit what AD information, the attributes you're going to import. Previously, you had to edit an XML file. So now this is all done within here. So we can see alpha1 is a combination of the given name and SN, which is the name field in Active Directory, and the web ID. So that's quite important. So the web ID, you may want to just have the email address, so you can change that to mail. So you can edit any of these fields. You can say department, I don't want that to go into alpha 2, I want that to be alpha 14, for example. Got to bear in mind you can't put the same alpha field in twice. So you've got the ability to edit. By default, none of these are going to be imported, so you need to actually enable each one of the fields you want to be imported. So I'm just going to click these for the moment. And the same for computers. By the way, you can add brand new records within here as well. So we can see we're not using alpha 15 or num 1, 2, and 3. So we can add records, and maybe you've got a custom field in AD, you want to import into num 2. So you can add that record. And the same for computers. I'm just going to leave the defaults and map to these. You can just enable it by double clicking on that and pressing the toggle to the right. Organizational unit map, by default, that's going to go into the OU CID style. So we don't need to change this. It's very rare you'd need to change this, so I would just leave that. So only configure users and computers. And then you've got your settings within here. So I would recommend to leave these as default, but you can change these. In a new system, what happens is it will create these as new styles in the Richmond database. So if I go into the setup console underneath configuration management, those styles don't exist, which doesn't matter because this service will automatically create these styles for you. You can choose any name you like within here, but recommend to leave as default. Domain root, recommend turning that on. If you don't tick that, it will just import these folders into Richmond and it won't put them underneath a domain folder. So click domain root and you can put the name. So I'm just going to put Richmond domain within here, and that would be the name of the root folder. Before, you didn't have the option to actually change that. It will just be whatever your domain name is, it will put that in. Move on parent change, recommend that to be turned on. So it means if you make any changes in the Active Directory, i.e. Joe Bloggs moves some sales to consultancy OU, it will replicate that in Richmond. So it's very rare that you wouldn't want that to be enabled. I know some customers actually want to create their own structure in Richmond. If they want to do that, they would turn it off, and it just means once it's imported, they can drag and drop users where they are, and they won't be moved back next time it does a sync. And you can use a recycle bin. What that will do is that move someone into the bin if they don't exist within Active Directory. So within ours, we've got a recycle bin here, and I want it to move AD users into this folder if they no longer exist, and the ID for that is number 7. So now I'm going to put number 7 within here. Okay, before we save, we need to connect to the database. So that's listing our database string in the config file that was set up earlier. And we can make sure it's enabled. Before we enable this, what we can do is save. And then you have the option to sync now. So it forces a sync on the fly into the Richmond database. So then if I go, what's important, once you go back to the web client, you just need to remember to log out and back in again in order for it to see users within there. So I'm just going to do that now. Before you log in actually back into the web client, just to check, I would recommend to go into the setup console. Just make sure you close this screen and reopen it for it to refresh, and you'd see your new styles in here. So you can see it creates a style for AD computer and so forth. Just go and check the icons, because not all the time it assigns the correct icons. It just depends whether it's an upgrade or new system. So for a computer, just going to change icon and choose the correct icon for the AD computer. So just go through that for each one of the new AD styles it is created and make sure you've got the correct icon assigned. And then you can log into the web client and check. So once you're happy with everything, it's important to enable this. So if we go to get full info again on there, and then you can enable that. Once it's enabled, it means it's then going to sync automatically, however long the time period is set within the config file. So just click that and go to save. So as long as the AD service is running and this is enabled, it's going to be syncing with Active Directory. So at any point you can go back into this. If I just refresh that tool, that link, we'll see it in the drop down here, and we can load it at any point. Go to get full info and we can edit any OUs, and then it's a matter of saving.